Hello Gold Coast Suns fans and welcome back to another episode of the GCSUNScast. My name is Shane, I'm your co-host. Joining me is Tom. Welcome to the show, Tom.
G'day Shane, how are you this week?
I'm fantastic. It was great to have some football on the TV again and we're able to see the best part of the year for Suns fans, which is seeing our team actually play decent football.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is the time of year where most of the players are fit. They know they're playing for round one spots. This year's a bit different because there's maybe 30 plus players playing for those 22 spots. So, yeah, it was, and it showed, didn't it?
It certainly did. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight. We've got the men's game discussing how that went down, why the Gold Coast Suns of 2020 look better than the Gold Coast Suns of 2019 and previously. We've got, hopefully if we get time, we'll get to some player rankings on what we thought the players from that men's game, how they performed, and how likely they are to be walk-up starts for the best 22 come round one. And we also have the AFLW to discuss. The QCLASH was a draw, so it was a very entertaining game of football for the women's game, and we'll have more to discuss about that. But first, before we get into the show any further, let's thank our old soul Patreon donors. So we'd like to thank Jack Stad, Dale Snelling, Paul Vosti, Tom Kim, Brody Burgess, Kate Kelland, Chris Moore, Robbie Fiorini, Tim and James Wood. Again, thank you guys for your donations. It helps keep the show going. You can head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/GCSUNScast and donate a couple of dollars our way if you guys enjoy the show. The other bit of housekeeping I need to report is apologise for the GCSUNScast plays last week was delayed. I just wasn't feeling fantastic and it's not the most entertaining thing if I'm talking there and not feeling too great. So hopefully we'll have another episode of that this Thursday. It doesn't look like my wife will be joining us. She's got plans. But I'll think of something and we'll find some sort of game that we can play. Something new that I haven't done before, I think.
Cool.
All right. Well, with that done, let's start off with some AFLW news. Now, the Gold Coast Suns played the Brisbane Lions in the first ever women's QCLASH, and it was a torn result, 4 goals for 28 apiece. Kalinda Howarth was the leading goal scorer with 3 goals. And, what a game that was. I missed the first quarter, but I tuned in for the last 3, and I reckon that last quarter of football was some of the most tantalising viewing I've ever seen. I jumped on the Facebook and I was telling everyone to watch it. It was must-watch footy. Unfortunately, the girls just couldn't get that extra point they needed to get the win.
Yeah, well, I mean, you missed the first quarter, which, I mean, it was even Stevens from both teams, but the Lions just knew they had to get out to a fast start because let's not forget they travelled down to Geelong last week. They had 1 day less break. Now, they said that they didn't think that was a factor, but it obviously was because, as you saw, the Suns were coming home full of gas and the Lions started to lose. The things that they were doing really well in the first and second quarters, they weren't doing so well. And take nothing away from the Suns, they were really catching up. Leah Kasler catching that knee and Sam Virgo a bit earlier on, just going into a tackle awkwardly. Both of them went off for concussion protocol. Neither of them are going to miss any game time, but they missed game time in that game, and that was really decisive. What did you think?
Yeah, it didn't. What was I going to say? It didn't disappoint the expectation of it being a QCLASH. It was certainly hard, ferocious, and very aggressive football from both sides. Like you said, Leah Kasler from the Suns, and there was a Lions player, I think, that went down very early in that final quarter. And,
that's true, yeah.
It had an impact, I reckon, for both sides. But the real shining light of that game for the Suns was Kalinda Howarth with her 3 goals. And she's also been nominated for the Rising Star award for the AFLW this week.
Which she's been nominated with a St Kilda player who bombed a goal from outside 50 and won the game for the Saints. So not only did she get the nomination, but she's paired up with someone who you would have thought before the game was a shoo-in for the Rising Star. So Kalinda's really got to be proud of herself. And it doesn't matter if you share the nomination; it's being nominated that counts. And she's got 5 more games to try and take it out. And given her backstory and experiences, what a great story! And she's going to be a 10-year player, if not more.
Absolutely, I hope she is. She caught my eye in the first game against GWS with her pace, and I thought she's got a lot of X factor, and she's going to be really handy. And yeah, she's come out so quickly in round 3 and really showed us what she can do.
And the other thing is Jamie Stanton, although she didn't have the same game she'd had the week before, she's now second in the coaches' votes for the whole AFLW, second behind a Collingwood player who has gotten 3 10s out of 10. So second's no slouch. Jamie's probably not going to win it because it's a long way to come back, but she's going to place if she keeps going the way she's going, and that's for the MVP as far as that's concerned. She's a front runner.
So the other thing was the best on ground votes. The QCLASH award that they give out for the best on ground went to a Lions player. I guess considering the amount of ball that was going into that Lions defensive 50 in the last half, I can sort of understand that. But I clearly thought Howarth was best on ground.
Kate Lutkins is a tremendous player and did deserve it. You'd think if the Lions had won, and if the Suns had won, it definitely would have gone to Kalinda. So it's sort of a flip of a coin, isn't it? I guess what comes out of it is that Kate Lutkins gets the QCLASH medal and Kalinda gets a Rising Star nomination, so they both walk away with something they wanted.
And the only other Sun to poll on the best on ground votes was Dunn. Did I get that right?
Oh, she was great. She's been great all year. So, what do you think about the debate today that there should be extra time in AFLW games because it's such a short season? And having a draw is actually an advantage to the Suns because it takes out percentage out of the equation if there's no other draws in the conference. So even though we're out of the top 3 at the moment, we're only a couple of points out. And if we sort of go reasonably well towards the end of the season, it's only the Lions that we really have to worry about percentage if it's sort of between us and them. And there's a chance that there'll be another QCLASH this year because the way the finals are worked out, the teams cross over, and so there'll be Conference A versus Conference A at various points. So there's a small possibility of a grand final QCLASH, but we won't get ahead of ourselves.
No, let's not
Stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, it's way too early to tell about how handy that those extra points are from the draw will be.
Yeah. Do you think there should be extra time, or do you think it's just that's the game?
No, we still have the draw during the regular season in the men's. I don't see why it wouldn't happen in the women's as well. Mr. Bods is in the chat. He agrees. He's also asking a couple of questions about why, more so coaching-related questions. Why do you think the coach took Kalinda off with 4 minutes left and he struggled to get Kaslar back onto the field as well? In those dying minutes when we were desperate to get it behind. I think the Kaslar thing was interesting. There could have been injury or concussion that could have held that up, and the quarters are really, really short quarters.
Yeah. So
there's just not enough time to get all that proper testing done for Kaslar if it was concussion.
Well, she was fine to come back on. But you've got to have a major stoppage, and she's got to run 100-odd metres to get to the forwards. Or, as it was, they've shifted Virgo forward, which I thought was a good effort because she almost got free to sort of get that behind. But Brisbane just stacked all their players behind the ball, and it was a really there was a couple of times on the goal line there where they stopped that behind. Look, the Suns probably should have won it, and it's the same with the game against the Giants, and they'll learn lessons from that.
All right, well, let's just finish off by saying the crowd for this game was 4,223. So not a bad effort. I figure it would have been a better crowd if fans weren't expected to pay for entry for this one, because it was a doubleheader with the men's. And I believe it was about $20 a person to get in for the doubleheader of the games. And on top of that, we also had the All-Stars game in the NRL just down the road. And that certainly doesn't help with the crowd base, the fans. If they got a choice of going and seeing a women's game and a men's practice game versus seeing some of the best NRL players in the competition, you know which one they're going to go pick. They're going to go towards the NRL fans, and we are in NRL heartland here on the Gold Coast. Clearly,
there's 24,000.
Yeah, and that's close to maximum capacity for that stadium, I think.
Exactly, and well, it was the Indigenous versus Australians versus the Indigenous New Zealanders. So, that's even more. Sometimes they have like the All Stars or the rest of the world or something like that. And this was a big game. Yeah, it was and look, you can't blame them because it's a once in a year thing and it's a representative game. It's kind of like the state of origin for AFL this week. Well, you wouldn't be caught dead trying to put on any sort of event on the same time because they're going to get 100,000. So, the AFL and the NRL need to grow up. It's just stupid. These events get scheduled in well in advance, and in the AFL's case, they've just tacked on a pre-season game to the AFLW, and the AFLW schedule didn't get approved until not that long ago. It was only like 2 months ago. So, yeah, I'm a bit dirty on them for that. But then again, the Suns kind of own Saturday afternoon, so.
Just before we move on, we've got Jen in the chat, newcomer. Welcome to the show, Jen. She's saying she loves the draw. It happens very rarely in the game. And that brings me back to the year of 2010 when Collingwood St Kilda had a draw in the grand final, the last drawn grand final. And I happened to have $10 on the draw in that game, won 400.
Wow.
So I was the only one in the pub. We went down to the Mermaid Beach Surf Club and was watching it there because that's the St Kilda supporter base on the Gold Coast. And I was the only one in the pub at the end of the game, jumping up and down, screaming with joy. So that was very interesting that day.
Most Collingwood supporters hated the idea at the time, but I'll tell you what, the replay the following week, Collingwood thrashed them, and they reckon that when you went to the ground, people could actually buy a ticket, whereas the AFL Grand Final is becoming like the Super Bowl. You have to know somebody to be invited to get there. You have to pay through the nose to get tickets, and even then you got to go into a bit of a lottery. So yeah, I reckon they should have kept the draw and go for an extra week. But of course, everyone just went nah.
It was a strange game, that one, because I remember all the hype about the fans being able to actually get in and not just the corporates. But
Jen's saying she got to see it, and then she wouldn't have if it wasn't a draw, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I guess the only people that really had fond memories of that day would be Collingwood supporters. I personally thought the spectacle was a bit of a letdown, just because it was so one-sided. But we see more and more one-sided grand finals these days than we do close contest ones. All right, well, let's jump ahead into the men's game. So, Gold Coast Suns defeated Geelong 17 goals 20, 122 to 7 goals 10, 54. So, a 68-point win there. Fantastic effort from the Suns men's. Sexton had 6 goals, King and Day 2 apiece. And we had a slightly more crowd numbers than the women's with 5,903.
Yeah, so, I don't think it was like the 4,000 plus 2,000. I think it was probably more like only a couple of thousand stuck around. And so the men's probably had around 4,000 for that one only, and there was a carryover. So yeah, considering there was 7,000 last week for the AFLW, and only about 500 people turned up for the men's practice, it was a bit different. But you put two events on in 2 weeks, 2 consecutive weekends at Metricon, it's going to strain things. I think there's a lot of reasons for that low crowd. But anyway, let's get into the game.
All right, so I'll say a few of the takeaways I took from that game. Now, the new faces had an impact. As a fan watching the game, I could immediately see Hugh Greenwood standing up in tackles and still having the clean hands to get the ball out, which is something we haven't had.
Well, he had the first clearance of the game.
Yeah.
Didn't he?
We saw Rao and Anderson with their flashes of brilliance around the ground as first game players in AFL, having an impact. We saw Brandon Ellis out on the wing providing speed and cool thinking to get the ball inside 50 or the next kick out of the back line. So we saw these new faces have a real impact. Fast ball movement was another big thing. We've seen that before in, even last year, although last year's game against the Dogs this time last year was a very hard-fought contest in Cairns. But I think the year before, I think we might have played Geelong up in Townsville, and again, that was a very fast-paced game, I thought. This one was different because I felt like we were hitting targets. We were aware of where the ball was going to land, so the players were able to get front and centre and crumb. And we were running. We were running with each other, and there were always options. We weren't handballing to people that were under the pump. Very rarely, anyway. So it was a huge thing. And the last takeaway I've got from this game was actually something I got from speaking to one of the staff on game day. And he said that being the position that he holds, he's out on the ground assisting. And he said the one thing he's noticed this year is just how much bigger the Suns players are than what they have been in previous years. Physically demanding of size. And the commentators on the TV said that. They said that something that's different for the Suns is their tackles are sticking. They're not being pushed over as easily as what they used to. So we're actually starting to see the physical development of the Suns that we've been hoping to see for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, too right. I mean, look, one observation straight off the bat: whenever you play Geelong, if you can get out to a lead on them, they generally eventually they'll bring it back in. And that's what we saw. We got out to a bit of a lead. Probably should have been a bigger lead if we were kicking straighter or converting better, especially with those bloody 4 behinds in a row in the second quarter. And then they got in front, and then we kicked a few goals, and that's what the halftime score sort of looked like. And you thought, maybe we'll keep this up, and it could be a close fought thing because you knew Geelong were going to come back. Except this isn't best 22 Geelong. That's probably about 3/4 strength, which makes it all the more impressive. And we're probably at about 3/4 strength, which is, says a lot about our depth for this year. But Geelong really put the pressure on to come back in that third quarter, and I was just really amazed at the way that our players were able to not just respond, but when they started kicking goal after goal, they just kept the hammer on. And that's when the Geelong coaching staff went, well, we're just not going to win this. So let's just keep the young guys out there. We'll put a few players on ice, and that's how the game played out. So it was a bit of fun for the Suns in the fourth quarter. Geelong were competitive, but it was all over in that third quarter. Without concentrating on players, and to add to what you were saying, we did a bit better than them in the ruck, and normally that ruck dominance doesn't necessarily translate into centre dominance, but we did manage to really match them in the clearances and the stoppages and all that kind of stuff. So that was just really good to see.
So obviously it was just a practice game, and like you touched on, Geelong, they did try. We saw aspects of them putting their best team in. They had probably arguably their best backline they could muster. They still had Dangerfield and Ablett running through the midfield at certain times, especially, I think, like you said, one point in the third quarter, they tried to stem the flow, and so they tried to win back dominance in the midfield by putting Ablett, Dangerfield, their best midfielders in there. And the Suns, I think, got the very next takeaway.
Yeah, it didn't last long.
It wasn't having an impact. And then obviously it got to a point where Geelong were like, all right, well, like you said, they didn't see any chance in trying too hard. And you could see that from the third quarter onwards that they just weren't chasing hard enough, laying tackles. Now, it's going to be completely different come the round one, because the tempo of the game speeds up a bit even more. And, players will be chasing. They're constantly chasing. And I would expect a team like Geelong to do what Gold Coast were doing throughout the whole game. And you watch the footage back. The fourth quarter, I think there was a minute left to go. You could still see Alex Sexton chasing his opponent, running his guts out to lay a tackle. That's not something you would normally see in a preseason game. And we saw that from the Suns. The Suns were just, they brought the intensity and the enthusiasm right from the start, and they still had it at the end of the game, which is really pleasing. So we're going to see a really competitive Suns side, at least for the early half of the year. We have a history of dropping off as the players tire, but hopefully we can maintain this for a lot longer than what we were last year with the hard, contested, close contact footy. The players' bodies should be able to hold up a bit better. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think we can see a really strong, competitive run and gun style Suns play for a majority of the season.
Well, I mean, even though we weren't at our best, when these players who've been held out, and look, they're having a lot of them, like Harbrow and Hanley, and we know that Witts and Thompson have are recuperating from injury, but there's probably about 6 or 8 guys who are going to come back in the next 2 to 4 weeks, and that just says to me that there are plenty of positions open for selection, and the next trial game is really where it's going to happen. There is another NEAFL trial game before that round one first selection sort of goes on, and there are a couple of NEAFL trial games that happen in rounds 1 and 2 of the AFL. So there's a lot of footy that this club's going to play in the next month that will really determine how our start of our season is going to go. And our injury list might sound bad at the moment, but it's really not. It's holding up better than usual, and players are just they're on sort of round 1 or round 3 or round 7 return dates. There's only really a couple of guys who are mid-season returns, and 1 out of 52 who's gone for the year, and we can replace them if we want to. If things are really looking good. Shane, we're a year older, and even though we brought in the rookies, the guys we brought in are ready to play. So we're going to bring all of those guys forward. We're going to be good this year. We're going to be great in the next few years. Just really, really depends on how the guys take this new game plan to that next level.
Yeah. Mr. Bodds is in the chat asking whether they can tackle for 4 quarters all year. Based on what we've seen, and from my understanding of the players' bodies being a lot more physically larger and more demanding, it's obvious they've got a new tackle coach or something going on there, because their technique seems a lot more sound than what it has been. Or maybe it was just the Geelong T-shirts. That could be the problem. But
could be, yeah.
But I'm confident that, with the exception of let's say half a dozen games scattered throughout the whole year, we'll see the Suns with a really strong, hard at it performance. some players will have off nights, and we're going to get to the players in a bit because we haven't really delved into that.
Well, let me answer your rhetorical question. I think it's a yes. I don't know who or where or when. Yes, there's definitely been a focus on tackling in the off season. I'll tell you, last week in the practice match, the younger guys who didn't get a run this on Saturday night, even they were tackling at this kind of intensity. And the players that they were running up against was probably a better than half strength Lions team. Not exactly a greatly different unit that ran around yesterday against Port. So yeah, tackling for 2020, I'd expect to see it. Obviously, when you get into those competitive games where teams are out on their feet in the fourth quarter, you're not going to see, Sean Lemons sprint 40 metres to go and nail someone. But I think in seasons gone, the Suns have really tried to stay in the game for the first two quarters, and they're just rooted in the second half, and they get blown out. So yeah, I don't see that anyone can maintain that kind of intensity for four quarters. But this year they're going to be playing. The group is going to play four quarters, and that's what we really want to see, isn't it?
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to have to split this up into 2 episodes, I think, if we can't get through it all. But what we plan on doing is going through the player list of everyone that played in that game and having a couple of words to say about them and where we think they're going to fit into the Suns in 2020, whether they're going to be definite starters, possible starters, probable starters. So let's start off with Jack Bowes wearing the number 3. Tom, give us a few words about Jack Bowes.
Jack Bowes is definitely best 22. He may even remain in the back line if he plays like that every game. Look, he's just cool, calm and collected. Many people may not have realised he actually got named in the best on ground. So even though he didn't rack up the biggest stats, he didn't do anything wrong, and he really held that back six together. It was a bit of a Luke Hodge type performance. Everyone was wondering where the next Luke Hodge comes from. It could be Jack Bowes.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. And the other thing, Jack Bowes lined up on Ablett most of the night, at least when Ablett was forward, and Ablett had minimal impact. So he could be the answer to that small defender that we're calling out for that can just shut down opposition players.
Yeah, when he wasn't on Ablett, he was on Dangerfield. Dangerfield didn't exactly tear it up. I mean, he did do damage, but I mean, he's a Brownlow medalist much more recently than Gaz.
Yeah. All right, so the next player is number 4, Brandon Ellis. So, first time Sun, we got to see him in action. He was very quick. You notice how quick he actually is on the field. He got into the right spots on the wing and really used that to his advantage. We saw a number of contests where he was able to get out with the ball and get it clear. And I think it was one of the first plays we saw him in that first quarter. He got the ball beautifully off half back and was able to get the ball going straight down the line on the outer wing to a Suns player, and I'm pretty sure that went down the other end and at least gave us a scoring shot. I think Ainsworth might have been the one that missed the shot on goal, but it definitely gave us a chance to score, and we've been missing a winger that can really help clear the ball with a damaging kick towards our forward 50. We've been missing that sort of a player for many years. So
yeah, if you asked me last year, what if I could have an A grade player from any position on the field, I would have said we need a winger, and that's what he does. So we needed a real wingman, and at Metricon we tend to sort of play on that interchange side a lot, and that's where he. I mean, we go back and forth, but that's where I sort of noticed him the most is playing in that sort of close to the bench kind of role, no matter which way we were going. And I mean, it took 6 marks, and that's what you need: a marking, running, communicative, knowledgeable experienced person on the wing. We haven't really had that, but I do think that that Weller, who we'll get to in a minute, is the answer on the other wing. But then again, maybe you'll disagree. So let's get on to number 6, eh?
So number 6 is Alex Sexton. So he had 6 goals to match his jumper number. Geez, he's a smart player, isn't he? He gets into the right position and he really knows how to milk a goal. And also, like I said before, I saw him chasing really hard in that fourth quarter. I know I've criticised Sexton last year for being a player that can just be shut down so easy and doesn't try hard enough, but I really saw the side of Sexton that I like on the weekend, and that was the side that chases hard, lays hard tackles, and then follows it up the other way, chasing hard to try and get the hands off for a goal, and it really worked well for him.
Did you see that article not that long ago? It was only last week where they posited, they actually borrowed a few of my statistics and ideas, but anyway, it was in AFLW, and they looked at who should be the full forward for the Suns, and they said, Peter Wright doesn't catch enough forward 50s. Ben King's promising. Sam Day. And Alex Sexton is actually the best at doing the full forward role. And if they're going to do that, how do they do that? And there's a lot to it, but I don't think he's full-time full forward. I just think various game, you just go, rightio, Alex in the goal square, everyone else do what you need to do to get the ball to him, because he's going to score a goal. Right? Similar to the way Collingwood will do it with one of their medium-sized, rather than put a giant gorilla in the goal square. Anyway, we'll see if it happens.
All right, and the player that wears number 7, Will Brodie. So
yes,
he had
Will
a great
Brodie.
night, didn't he?
I mean, it's no secret that we're going to give him. He's a definite best 22 starter. Look, had lots of touches. It was all in the right direction. He's really worked on on lowering his eyes and putting the ball where the forwards have the best places, usually kicking into forward 50. Great communication with teammates. The only time I thought that he looked like he didn't really know where he needed to be was with Greenwood. The two of them kind of wanted to be in the same spot. So if they could interchange as that, bull sort of midfielder, then we're really because I don't think Brodie's the your number one main midfielder type, because he still hasn't got that full tank yet, although he's looking better and better. So Greenwood will really show him a few things, and I think the pair of them will really dominate, and they'll be sort of rather than one or the other in the team, the pair of them will be rotating through that guts.
Yeah, I really liked what I saw of Brodie. We heard a lot of good things about him last week, about how he's improved his game, and we saw that again this week. Now, I'm not quite sure what his time on ground percentage was, Tom, but he had a lot of the ball, and when he had the ball, he looked like he had the time and the composure to make the right decision. And so that's something we haven't seen from Brodie. Last year we saw him get the ball and then just sort of blaze away with a long kick or something. But this year he looked almost Scott Pendlebury-esque. He grabbed the ball and you just see him take a minute to just think about what he was going to do next, and he'd get the hands away or have a nice long kick to a player on the lead. And most of the time that came off for him. So I'm really excited about Brodie. I think we're going to see a real breakout year from him this year. And
60% time on ground, 29 touches.
Yeah, so he
would have been a 40-touch game in a normal 80-minute performance.
So that was a great performance by Brodie. And the other player I think is going to have a real breakout game is our next player, number 9, Ben Ainsworth. Tell us more about what you thought about his game.
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy who he actually played pretty high, higher minutes, was 65%. So didn't play the whole game like he normally would, but yeah, when he was on the field, just fantastic. The meters gained was the highest of either side, which is exactly what you want to see. Everyone's got him down as a forward, but I think he might be sort of named on the flank and play kind of an outside midfielder role. He played a bit on the wing last year, didn't he? I didn't really see him on the wing in this game, but yeah, he'll go in the middle and get it. He'll take some marks on the 50. He can kick it from there. We'll have to see where his position is, but maybe guys like this start on the bench and then just come in and go where they need to be, rather than trying to decide how many small forwards you're going to have or any of that kind of thing.
Yeah, Ainsworth was really impressive. Again, he looks to have taken his game up another notch this year. He probably could have had 2 goals quite easily in that game, if not more. So, again, Brodie, Ainsworth, Bowes, that's our draft class of 2016. We saw Bowes sort of take a mid-leap last year before getting injured. This year, we've got Ainsworth, Brodie as well. They all look like they're just going to go up another gear, and that's going to be the important part to seeing the Suns rise up the ladder this year. So
that's right.
Next stop is player 11, Tuke Miller.
Yeah, I've got the odds, and Shane's got the evens, so that's why you're hearing a lot from me. Look, Tuke was fantastic. He early on, he really looked clean and sharp. Like you, I watched it twice. You were there and watched it, the replay on TV. So you must have seen 2 different kind of approaches. I just watched it twice in the same thing. But second time round, I noticed too. He was very good without being the best player on the field, which is fine. His forward pressure was fantastic. Laid 9 tackles just like Ainsworth did, and had 25 touches, which is great. But yeah, I just couldn't help but wonder. Sometimes maybe we could find someone a little cleaner in there, and maybe find another position for Miller. Mr. Bodds is saying, he's a tagger, and I totally agree. But we've been sort of really hot on this idea that Miller should be a tagging defender who can go into the midfield as needed. What did you think of his performance?
Personally, I hardly cited him, but you saw him a couple of times, but clearly with the 25 touches, he was getting the ball a lot more than what I thought he was. And we know Miller's a hard tackler, and as Mr. Bod says, a tagger. So the 9 tackles doesn't surprise me. Neither does the forward pressure. But you've written here fast. So you're probably right. He does look to have upped his speed a bit. He did seem when you did see him, he did seem to move a bit quicker than what we've seen him in the past. But I don't know, how do you up your speed? Like, maybe he's been playing with injury for the last couple of years. I'm not quite sure.
Well, Tuke has a history of having well, it doesn't quite go odd even, but last year and then 2 years before that, he played with injury. And so he's not as fast. But he had a foot injury a few years ago. And it just seems like he's finally fully over it and running at full gallop. It doesn't always mean him and a player we're going to talk about in a minute, not the most accurate of games. So, for me, he loses a couple of points. Just maybe he's a bit rusty, or it's just new players, and he's kicking it to where he thought they, but they don't end up being there or whatever. I tend to be a bit more harsh on the guys who've been around for a little bit longer.
All right. Well, next player is number 12, Sam Day. He provided a really strong target, especially as the game wore on and they moved Peter Wright on the ball to ruck. Sam Day came on and went down back. He was really solid, I thought, and he plays that mobile tall forward role really, really well. He only had 53% of time on ground, so he clearly spent half the game off. But I thought he was just as good as Peter Wright. So I still think the Wright and Day discussions are still going to be had. So you would have to put him in the category of being a probable. We think that he'll play.
Yeah.
If you have a choice between Day and Wright, I'm still leaning towards my pre-season prediction that Sam Day is our man. But I'd need to see more from both Day and Wright to make an educated decision on that.
Yeah, I want them all. I want King, Wright, and Day, and just no more. Never have all three of them in the one spot because it's just not going to work. You give Witsy a few more breaks, and he's going to need it because he's missed this important pre-season time. Have Witsy on the ball 75% of the time, and then give him 10% resting in the half forward, just on the edge of the goals, on the edge of the 50-metre arc, and have Peter Wright go in there as much as possible because he is a ruck forward, not a forward who chops out in the ruck. We're seeing that more and more. Daisy looks great. I kept getting him a bit confused with 21, 12 and 21. They're both tall and blonde. Look, what do you think about Sam Day for the Westhoff type role, where he could be a swingman, and Bodsy's saying this, that Day could be a swingman. Move him where he's needed, like a chess piece. That's to my mind, he's a veteran who can do it all.
Yeah, it's interesting. Day is capable of playing defence, playing forward, playing in the ruck, but have we seen his best footy when he is moved around? We haven't seen his best footy when he's been forward, except for one or two games where he has a really good goal-kicking game. I think the most goals he kicked in a game might be 3, if I'm not wrong. And defence, he looks okay, solid down back. I mean, it's not too hard to punch a ball away. But again, I don't think we see the best of Sam Day down back either. It's a real tough thing. I think Sam Day is one of the players that needs to be given a position so that he can just focus on what he's doing. So for mine, I don't like the idea of him being a swingman. I think quite simply he needs to have a single position. These forwards do need to run. These forwards do need to go down the wings and take those marks down the flanks. So if you're going to have Peter Wright roaming around centre
the
half
field,
forward. I can see Day as a high centre half forward. Absolutely. Just not having two different roles of one trying to be an attacker and then two trying to be a defender. I think that's just too much. And I can still even see him doing ruck and forward. They're not too dissimilar. The whole point is you're both attacking the ball. We've only got 2 minutes left, Tom, so we're going to put a pause on our player reviews and leave all that till next week's episode. Give us something to talk about next week with the men's having a week off. We have one more question coming through on our Facebook from Paul Vosti. He wants to know, hi guys, with Sexton, Benny and Darcy locks as small forwards, how do we get both Isaac and Lemons into the side? This is a real tough one. I think if we're going to do that, we basically have to be playing a small forward line, and this may mean that Sam Day and Peter Wright miss out completely, and we just go with the one tall in Ben King, and then maybe have the mobile forward such as Alex Sexton join them.
It's certainly hard to name a best 22 right now without leaving out 4 or 5 players that you really wanted in there.
Yeah. All right. Well,
and I have to say that Rankin's not there, and so he's not in the best 22 yet.
No, not yet. But we do expect Rankin to be there. I think Lemons is the most vulnerable out of them. But we'll get to Lemons next week. He had a great game, so we'll talk more about Lemons next week and McPherson. But that is definitely a hard question. All right, well, it's time for us to go, Tom. Thanks for joining me on the GCSUNScast. Thanks to all of our live listeners. It's been a very exciting chat, talking to everyone there. And thanks for listening if you're tuning in later on YouTube or Spreaker. So until next time, go Suns.
Go Suns.